being normal is a myth. Think about some of your colleagues taking a break, jerking off in restrooms, picking your nose and eating your own boogers when nobody sees. Being a part of a society, you are strongly encouraged to be like everyone else, to be normal. But in terms of what that actually represents, it has become very skewed and blurred as the world globalizes and normal starts to lose its own boundaries, and it becomes up to the interpreter how he sees the meaning of that word. Are you normal? Let's find out. I have a video from School of Life and I will comment on what that notion of being normal stands for and how you should see yourself as a part of society. Let's dig into it.
Most of us are rather interested in being normal. We want to belong and worry about ways in which we don't quite. No matter how much we praise individualism and celebrate ourselves as unique, we are in many areas just deeply concerned with fitting in. It's therefore unfortunate that our picture of what is normal is in fact very often way out of line with what is actually true and widespread. Many things that we might assume to be uniquely odd or disconcertingly strange about us are in reality completely average and ubiquitous, though simply rarely spoken of in the reserved and cautious public sphere.
Normality is a perfected picture of what a decent human being should represent. I mean a person whose characteristics are calibrated to the average middle ground. Average fun, average looking, average conversationalist, but that average doesn't have any base to it. Like for example, when we speak about having a normal weight, it doesn't represent what we really mean, the health of population. In westernized world, more than half of the population is overweight, and big chunk of those are morbidly obese. So being skinny, being small, being thin is quite extraordinary, and you will be separating yourself from the crowd, at least superficially speaking, if you keep your body trim and develop a healthy diet.
The idea of the normal currently in circulation is not an accurate map of what is actually customary for a human being. We are, each one of us, far more compulsive, anxious, sexual, high-minded, mean, generous, playful, thoughtful, dazed, and at sea than we are ever encouraged to admit.
I mean, people do very freaky stuff, weird stuff, and nobody ever talks about those because we're ashamed of our bodies and routines and how people might perceive us. And I mean, that's reasonable. We wouldn't like to sabotage our own reputation, not being a serious person or having some weird hobbies and activities that we engage in. Like, think about some of your colleagues taking a break and jerking off in restrooms to release stress or just because they are bored and restless and don't have a lot of work tasks to accomplish. I mean, I've heard about colleagues who take the water cooker with them to the toilet because they're used to wash their asses with water after they have finished pooping. Gross, I know, yeah, but I mean, for some it might seem like something very outrageous and unique, but there are a lot of people who have similar type of quirks and characteristics and personalities who would be okay doing similar stuff. Maybe not that disgusting, but you know what I mean.
Part of the reason for our misunderstanding of our normality comes down to a basic fact about our minds, that we know through immediate experience what's going on inside us, but we can only know about other people from what they choose to tell us, which will almost always be a very edited version of the truth. We know what we've done at 3 a.m, but imagine others sleeping peacefully. We know our somewhat shocking desires from close up. We're left to guess about other people's from what their faces tell us, which is not very much.
Like picking your nose and eating your own boogers when nobody sees. But this one time, some of your friends or colleagues or other people that you know closely had the chance to lay a gander upon your very unorthodox way of disposing garbage. What I'm saying is that trying to reach this utopia picture of normality is very disingenuous and it's not being yourself. Normality, being normal, is just a shaming tactic for people to put themselves in the line and not try to be somebody with own personality and strengths and weaknesses, because that would shine light upon people's own insecurities and inabilities to be themselves. And ego doesn't want that. Ego wants to be protected.
This asymmetry between self-knowledge and knowledge of others is what lies behind loneliness. We simply can't trust that our deep selves can have counterparts in those we meet, and so we stay silent and go melancholy. The asymmetry encourages shyness too, for we struggle to believe that the imposing, competent strangers we encounter can really have any of the vulnerabilities and idiocies we're so intimately familiar with inside our own characters.
Not showing yourself to others might be a short-term solution for melting into a new group of people, but in the long run that means suppressing yourself and not living up to your own potential. The only person you can outshine is your own self, and it's better to be imperfect, better version of yourself than perfect nobody.
Ideally, the task of culture should be to compensate for the failings of our brains by assisting us to a more correct vision of what other people are normally like, by taking us in a realistic but entertaining way into the lives of strangers. This is what novels, films and songs should constantly be doing, defining and evoking states of mind we thought we were alone in experiencing, in order to alleviate our shyness and our loneliness. We are particularly bad at recognizing how normal it is to suffer and to be unhappy.
I have several videos talking about loneliness, but in this particular case, you become lonely when you detach yourself from yourself, when you're not being authentic with yourself. The moment that you find yourself in your own company, you don't recognize that person that you see in the mirror. And it becomes torture to hang out with yourself, to have a me time, because you don't have anything in common with the person that looks back at you. And loneliness begins with yourself. When you are not at peace at all times and enjoy your own company, the loneliness will haunt you even in the most crowded places. That type of loneliness is a consequence of not connecting with anybody. Because in order to connect with someone, you have to know your own deepest self, at least to an extent, so that you know what you want to attract to your own life.
Around relationships, for example, we constantly operate with an image of the bliss of others, which mocks and undermines our own efforts to keep going, with many flawed but eminently good enough unions. We find it hard to bear in mind that more or less everyone is, beneath a cheery surface, intermittently, profoundly sad, and rarely not anxious. We become embarrassed too by our close-up knowledge of our own sexuality, which appears necessarily more perverse than that of anyone we know. It almost certainly isn't. We simply haven't been told the full story.
As I mentioned previously, just because you do some freaky stuff and you haven't told it to anybody, be it sexually or be it otherwise, like climbing up on a toilet seat to take a poop at the corporate restroom and thinking that you are the only person who does things like that, almost becoming ashamed of your own personality and little quirks that you possess. Everybody has something freaky in them, weird and unique. That's the beauty of life. There's no two similar people in this world. And to enjoy this ride called life fully, you have to accept yourself for all the goods and bads. Not that there are any, because that's a perception. What I mean is to love yourself fully, regardless of circumstances or the deeds that you do.
One great goal of a love novel, for instance, should be to tell us what love and long-term relationships are really like, so that our own tribulations wouldn't appear so readily as signs that everything had gone wrong. Our culture often tries to project an idea of an organized and poised and polished self as the standard way that most people are. We should discount this myth. Other people are always far more likely to be as we know we are than they are to be like the cardboard cutouts we meet in our social life.
The whole purpose of this is to explain to you that you should stop looking after perfection and try to experience the reality of living as a human being. Not through lenses, not through cameras, not through videos, not through pictures, not through stories, but your own experiences. Because we people are very keen to uphold a strong reputation, we will always try to put our best foot forward. And in those cases, we tend to project a perfect picture of who we are instead of putting genuine effort representing who we are, really, without any curtains. And your job is to find that authenticity and share it with the world. Perfect imperfections indeed. Being normal is a myth, and that saying is only a tool to keep people in control and conform to the convention. And the consequence of that is you suffering. Let you be you and let others admire you. Video on loneliness and how it is your own creation. A lot of wisdom in that. What's the most normal thing that you like to do? Tell me in the commentary section. But for now, Hossein out.